Hey guys, it's Allie. Welcome back to Infertile AF, the podcast. This is episode 56 called Leah. On today's episode, I'm partnering with Circle Surrogacy. Circle is passionate about surrogacy and egg donation and helping people achieve their dreams of parenthood. Circle's team is made up of experienced surrogates, intended parents, and egg donors. In fact, about 40% of their staff has been parents, surrogates, or egg donors and has experienced IVF or adoption. This year, Circle will celebrate 25 years of making parenthood possible for heterosexual and LGBTQ+ individuals and couples. During that time, they've helped create more than 1,500 families and bring more than 2,000 babies into the world across the United States and across the globe. Circle is emotionally invested in every single journey, and they partner with their surrogates, intended parents, and egg donors until they achieve success together. Their years of experience enable them to support their clients every step of the way and to navigate any bumps in the road with ease. You can learn more at circlesurrogacy.com or by emailing info@circlesurrogacy.com. Thanks, Circle. Okay, guys, so let me tell you about Leah. This is such a beautiful story, and it is a total tearjerker. I'm not going to lie. I really want her to tell it to you guys in her own words, so I'm not going to give you too many spoilers, but I will say that she's been through a lot, starting with being diagnosed as a teenager with PCOS. And then when she and her husband got married, they had a lot of ups and downs when it came to having a baby. So she and I met on the Surrogacy Advocacy Day up in Albany. She did end up using a surrogate, actually two surrogates, which you'll hear about. And she does have a daughter now named Carolina. So she's going to tell us all about that. But I also did want to say that this was recorded before they changed the law in New York. So the Child Parent Security Act was actually reversed, which was great news since we recorded this. So I asked her to say a little something about that, and I'm going to read that right now. Okay, so after the episode and after the law was reversed, this is what Leah says. She says, "I think it's amazing that surrogacy will be legal in New York State as of February of next year. It's long overdue. I hope the change will make it easier and more affordable for those that need to turn to surrogacy to start their families and for those who want to be surrogates but didn't pursue it in New York due to New York state law, and to be able to give the gift of a child to a couple in need." So that's what she has to say about that. It was a huge success, and we're all very happy that that has since changed. So kudos to Leah and all the people that were on the front lines fighting for that. And without further ado, this is Leah's infertility story. Good morning, Leah. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be
here. So I'll give a little background about us. Recently, you and I were both up in Albany lobbying for this surrogacy legislation, which is very near and dear to your heart, which you'll explain why as we get into your story. But so we did get to meet in person, and that was really great.
It was wonderful.
Yeah. So thank you again for doing this. So let's start out with your relationship with your husband. So tell me how you guys met. And I always like to start out with asking, did you always know that you wanted to have children?
Funny, the story of my husband and I meeting is a long story, but I will make it short. My husband is an artist, and he did a print for the High Line. And at the time, before we met, I worked at an office that overlooked the High Line, and I wanted a new piece of art for my office. So it was my birthday, and my brother said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Buy me this great piece of art from this artist, Michael DeFeo." And he's like, "Great, I will." And it arrived, and I was like, "Oh, this is great. But if I'm going to frame it, I really want it to be signed." So I went onto the artist website and I emailed him. And at the time, I was actually running a New York's first ever street art walking tour company. And I was giving walking tours. And whenever I met the artist, my tours became so much more interesting. So I was really interested in meeting him to learn more about him so my tours could be more interesting. And turns out he had just been on HGTV and I worked for the parent company. And he was like, well, maybe I can do something here. So he replied and said, why don't we have a meeting? I was like, well, are you going to sign, my artwork? He's like, of course I will. And so he came in, we signed my artwork. It became, pretty clear that there was something between us. We ended that meeting with a drink and had dinner the next week. And we've been together ever since. So we actually wound up getting married on the High Line, and the High Line did a little story on us. So that was came full circle from buying the artwork.
Cool. I love
getting married on the High Line. Yeah, it was in 2013, and yes, we knew we wanted a kid. My husband has a daughter, so I had a stepdaughter. When we got married, she was 8 years old. But we knew we wanted one of our own. And we thought we probably just wanted one since we also had my stepdaughter. But yeah, we always wanted one. We actually started trying pretty much right away. And I have PCOS. So I always knew it could be challenging for me to conceive. And sure enough, it was. So we started seeing a fertility doctor about a year after we were married.
Okay. So with the PCOS, when did you find out that you had that and how did it affect you health-wise?
I found out I had that as a teenager. My periods were super irregular and somewhat painful. And I was diagnosed in my teens and put on birth control to control it, which quite frankly worked really well for me. So I guess I was just lucky in that I felt, I hate to say it, but once I was on the birth control, it didn't really feel like it had a big impact on my life.
Right.
It really became an issue again when I then went off the birth control and was trying to get pregnant.
Okay. So what happened after you started seeing an RE right away with your husband?
We went to a clinic, a fertility clinic in New York, and I found that to be a really difficult experience. We waited a long time to get an appointment, went in there, spoke to the doctor. It felt very clinical, and I had a really tough time with this particular New York kind of clinic experience. Going through the process, we went through 3 IUIs in order to get pregnant. And going through the process, honestly, it felt like a cattle call. It didn't feel very personal. It was quite stressful for me. I was working at a really big media organization at the time. I didn't feel comfortable disclosing to my boss what I was going through. In terms of fertility treatments, there is an absolute bias in the workplace for women who want to become moms, and that's for real. And I felt that I was on a path in my career that might be impacted by my boss knowing that's what I was doing. So I didn't say anything, which made it super stressful, made it really stressful to, go in for those morning appointments. Even though it was IUI, there was still quite a bit of time that I had to be there and had to get monitoring. We did get pregnant on our 3rd IUI. I will say our 2nd IUI, when we didn't get pregnant, I had told one woman on my team who I was very close to and I trusted. I told her what was going on so she could kind of look out for me and, if I wasn't in the office, kind of make excuses. And she was amazing. And I remember when our 2nd IUI failed, I was actually in a meeting. And my phone rang and I knew it was the nurse and I knew this was the call that I had been waiting for. So I excused myself from the meeting and this girl was in that meeting with me and she looked at me a little thumbs up under the table. And I went out and the nurse said, I'm sorry, you're not pregnant. And I went back into the meeting and she just looked at me and I started crying.
Yeah.
And it was, it was really unprofessional in a lot of ways, but was also real. And, the meeting came to a screeching halt. And I guess I was lucky that it was all women in that meeting. And they were like, what happened? And I wound up telling them. And that was one of the first moments I realized that, we have to have better outlets for communicating this, especially in the workplace, because the level of stress and anxiety I had made it really, really challenging.
Such a good point. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I would have been able to go back into the meeting even.
It was at the time it felt important. It felt like an important meeting.
Right.
So I did go back into it. And, I'm also am very dedicated to my work and very much,
Mhm.
think I'm a superhero sometimes and can do everything. And obviously I couldn't. Our third IUI resulted in our pregnancy. And
Okay.
we were over the moon. We were so happy. To this day, that seeing that pregnancy test and seeing it positive was truly one of the best feeling moments of my life.
Yeah.
Just amazing. I remember I still have the pregnancy test. I literally still have that positive
Yeah.
test. And I was like, come on, it was the morning. I was like, let's take a picture. I was just so happy. And my pregnancy was amazing. And, my story goes on to talk about surrogacy, and I know we'll get there. But one of the things I feel really fortunate about was actually being able to carry, because most women who go through surrogacy go through it because they've had medical issues.
Mhm.
Not all, but the majority. They've had cancer, they have endometriosis, they have issues that mean they can't carry.
Right.
So I'm one of the few that went through surrogacy, but did get a chance to carry.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for that. I thought pregnancy was magical. I was so lucky. I felt really good throughout my pregnancy. I thought the 20-week ultrasound was like incredible. I stared at those pictures trying to figure out, we didn't know if our baby was a boy or a girl. So just, what is it? And feeling our baby kick, all of that was really incredible.
Yeah.
Really incredible.
Yeah.
But our pregnancy ended tragically. My uterus ruptured, which is really rare and really crazy.
Yeah.
I was 31 weeks. And the thing that I really want to kind of tell the listeners is during pregnancy and as you're going through all of these things, it's so important that we trust ourselves and we trust our own intuition and we advocate for ourselves. About 10 days before my uterus ruptured, I went to the doctor because I've been having this really strange pain. It was a pain that was in like the top right of my, my belly. And it would get really intense after, I was trying to be a really good pregnant woman. So I was exercising and walking up and down the stairs and trying to be healthy. And after those bouts of exercise, it would become like a shooting pain. It was very strange. And I went to my doctor, and my actual doctor wasn't available. So another doctor in the practice saw me, and they said, they just really dismissed me. They were like, you're getting big, of course. And I didn't feel like my baby was moving as much. They were like, yeah, you're getting bigger. Of course your baby isn't moving as much. And, yeah, well, it's getting tighter. So maybe they're pushing against that part of your body. And I was like, no, it feels weird. It feels like it really felt just didn't feel like a normal pain. And they did a cursory BPP ultrasound. They're like, you're fine. Sent me home. And then 10 days later, I happened to be working in Nyack. So I wasn't even in the city. And all of a sudden, this pain came back in the worst way. And I called my doctor's office, and they said, the receptionist was like, oh, I'm sorry, no one's available right now. I was like, I'm 31 weeks. I was in, a little while ago. I've got real pain. They're like, yeah, you're going to have to call back. I was like,
God.
Great.
Feeling completely brushed off.
Yeah. I called my coworker. I remember it was 10 to 3 and we had a 3:00 meeting. And I was like, look, I'm not going to make this meeting. I just don't feel good. And he tracked me down and was like, what are you talking about? And he called his wife, who was a doula. And his wife was like, get her to the hospital now.
Wow.
And I was like, take me to NYU. And he's like, and his wife said, no, absolutely not. You can't take her to NYU. You need to take her to the nearest hospital. And the nearest hospital was 8 minutes away. And despite my, wanting to go to NYU, where I was supposed to deliver, he took me to the nearest hospital, which was 8 minutes away. And
Nyack, which is not
I was in Nyack,
not far from NYU.
Yeah, which is an hour or so from NYU. Right. But it was 8 minutes from the nearest hospital. And when I got there, they had no idea what was wrong with me. They thought I was having an appendicitis. And they were like, we think we need to do a C-section. We need to do it as soon as possible.
Oh my
God.
God.
I was like, please wait. My husband's not here yet. Please wait. So I was kind of pushing them wait. And they pretty much did the C-section the moment my husband, he ran pretty much like in the room, gave me a kiss, and they wheeled me into the ER. And
scary.
It was horrible. The nurses said to me, okay, I need you to sit up for your epidural. And I looked at them and I was like, I can't sit up. Like, I'm in so much pain. I was like, take my arms and lift me. And then you can get, to my back that way. And I put my arms out, and the last thing I remember, they tried to pull me up and everything went white and I completely passed out.
Oh my God.
And I later learned that's when they realized this wasn't an appendicitis. Something else was going on. And my poor husband, they said to him, you can no longer cut. He was getting ready to like come in and be a part of the C-section. They said, you can't come in here. We're on a life-saving mission and you can't come into the ER. And then about 45 minutes later, my husband came into the room. He said there was puddles of blood all over and like bloody footprints all over. And I was there. And, he was looking over me when I woke up, and I saw him and he looked really scared. And the doctor, he gave me a big kiss and said he loved me. And the doctor said, your baby didn't make it. And I said, right, they're in the NICU. Like, when do I get to meet my baby? They're like, well, your baby, didn't make it. And I was like, well, where are they? And he said, well, you had a baby boy. And I just wasn't getting it. I wasn't understanding. And the doctor finally said, your baby died. We did everything we could, but he died. And it was so hard to comprehend. And it was horrible. And at that point, I was on a lot of drugs. In a rupture, your organs start failing. So I was on a lot of drugs and a lot of pain, went to the ICU. And that's where I was told later that, what had happened, that my uterus ruptured and that my son was stillborn and kind of floating in my abdominal cavity when they opened me up. I was super lucky to be alive, so lucky to be alive. And I was also lucky and remain grateful that doctor didn't just remove my uterus. He put my uterus back inside me, and I can never carry again. My uterus is not capable of carrying a baby, but I didn't go into menopause. And for that, I was really grateful. Being in the hospital, I guess another thing for listeners to know is when you go through this, you don't expect this. When you go through a pregnancy, it's all, you don't really think that this could ever happen. Right. So at the hospital, the nurses said to us, do you want to meet your baby? And my husband and I were like, I don't know, and I was on morphine. I was like, right. How about tomorrow? What about tomorrow? Can we meet our baby tomorrow? And they said, well, no, you have to meet your baby now. I was like, right now? They're like, well, yeah, because your baby goes to the morgue and then it becomes cold and hard. And then you definitely can't meet them.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So yeah, it was really just so much to take in. Cause again, like this isn't anything you're mentally prepared for.
Yeah.
At our baby. And I remember he was so beautiful and looked so peaceful. And he had this little cleft chin, which my grandpa had, and it just, it was really, he was really beautiful. And I just kept saying over and over again, I love you so much. And I'm so sorry. I love you. And I'm so, so sorry. I just kept saying it. And it was really hard. And my husband said, do you think we should take a picture? And I was thinking, I don't know. It feels like we should, but maybe it's creepy. Like, I just don't know. And he was like, let me take the picture. And if we never see it again, we never see it again, but maybe we should take it so we have it. And I was like, yeah, take it so we have it, take it. And to this day, I have that picture in a little mini picture frame, and it's, I carry it around with me. It's so meaningful. Yeah. And that's one of the things I wish the hospital staff had said to us, take pictures.
Yes.
And we'll get to the rest of my story, but there's an organization that I learned about afterwards called Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. And
they're great.
Yeah, they send photographers, hospitals in these situations for free, and they take these beautiful remembrance portraits. Right. So, anyone who does have a stillbirth or does have a child that they know isn't going to make it, that is an amazing service that I wish hospitals told patients about that were in these situations.
So did they tell you why your uterus had ruptured? What caused that?
So, yes. So I had a surgery to remove fibroids about 7 years prior. And when I got pregnant, I reminded my OB of that, and my OB checked with the surgeon. And this is kind of a longer story, and one I'm not going to go into detail with on the podcast, but essentially they said, you're fine. It's not a problem. You're totally fine.
Okay.
Turns out I wasn't fine at all. Turns out that surgeon, rather than the surgeon essentially punctured a hole in my uterus and never told me. And a uterus that's cut and sewn back together in a C-section grows back really strong and is able to carry a pregnancy. A uterus that's punctured is like a balloon. And when it gets to a certain level, it will just explode. And that's what happened to me. And I was never told that by the surgeon. In fact, my OB didn't know because he never moved the records from the hospital over to his office. So when my OB checked in on it, it was never a part of my records. So
did it say in your records that it had been punctured?
Did not.
Okay.
But the doctor in the hospital, when, I was going through everything, said to me, look, the only way this would happen to someone who hasn't been pregnant before is if your uterus is compromised in some way. Mm-hmm. And he encouraged me to go to the hospital where I had that surgery and get my records. And sure enough, in the operating room records and the post-op report, it's there clear as day.
Oh, yeah, that's what I meant, was in the operating records.
It was in the operating record.
Okay.
Never told to me. And it was, the surgeon did not keep that in his own records at his office, which meant that my OB wasn't aware of it and I wasn't aware of it.
Gotcha.
I mean, nevertheless, I think, again, for people who have maybe had uterine surgeries and are listening, the thing that should have been looked at for me is where my placenta attached, because it turns out my placenta attached over the same place where my fibroid was. Mm-hmm. And that should have been a risk that was known. And in situations like this, if I were on bed rest and if that rupture was something they kind of anticipated, and if I were in a hospital when I ruptured, it would have been a very different outcome.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, I'm so glad you shared that, because you might be helping people and to advocate for themselves. And if they've had uterine surgery, maybe look into it. And see.
That is 100% why I wanted to go into that level of detail, because I don't want anyone else to have to experience what I experienced.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
But your story continues. So tell me what happened after that.
Yeah. So I feel fortunate that I knew two women who are very close to me. One is my friend Angela, who I've known since kindergarten. And one is my cousin-in-law, Liz, who I've known for years and years. Both of them are cancer survivors, and they had hysterectomies. And before their hysterectomies, they froze eggs, and they wound up starting their families through surrogacy. So I knew of surrogacy. Surrogacy was not unfamiliar. It wasn't uncommon. I had two people super close to me who had gone through it. In the hospital, the doctors never said to me like, oh, well, don't worry, you can still do surrogacy. He said, you can never carry again. So as soon as I was kind of still in the hospital, I actually called each of them and I said to them, I really need to know how to do this. Like, how can I still have a baby? I didn't want to believe that losing my son, Christopher, was the end of my story. I needed to have hope. I needed to understand how I could keep going. I spoke to each of them from the hospital and they shared their stories about surrogacy. And so I spoke to the doctor next time he came to my room and I said, can I make embryos? Like, whatever happened to me, like, will I still be able to go through the process of IVF? And he said, yes, you can. And that was what I needed. I needed to hear that. I needed that hope. And so very soon thereafter, my rupture was in October. And this is going to sound really a little bit on the crazy side, but in November, I met with the surrogacy agency. Mm-hmm. I just was so determined. And
that's not crazy. There's no crazy in this.
Yeah, my husband and
We've all been there.
We did not want to give up. We didn't want to stop. We felt we were already just so behind and starting, our family. We were just upset about this. So we met with the agency, and we actually met with two different agencies. We wound up going with an agency in Boston. And I know, as you know really well, Ali, surrogacy is illegal in New York. So it makes it really, really challenging. So we went with an agency called Circle in Boston. And our New York clinic refused to see us because we were going to be doing surrogacy. They refused to treat us. They said, we cannot speak to you anymore. And quite frankly, that became a blessing in disguise, because we found this clinic in Greenwich, Connecticut. And I could not believe how I was treated there. The doctors took so much time with me. They answered all of my questions. If I had a question, I could email them. I had a patient advocate who picked up the phone when I called, who called me back, who, answered. I mean, it was like, even though I had to travel to Greenwich, Connecticut to go through this process of creating embryos, I would have chosen it the first time around if I had known what a different experience it was going to be for me and how less stressful it was to feel like I had this supportive doctor and supportive patient advocate helping me. So my husband and I signed on with the surrogacy agency. We started IVF actually kind of pretty soon after everything happened. And we signed on with the agency that January. And it was, we knew we were bringing a lot of anxiety to this pregnancy, having our own loss. And when you go through surrogacy, you write a letter to your future surrogate. And we, wrote to them about what we were, what our experience was and how we were so grateful that whoever this future surrogate was going to be willing to help us and to carry our baby, but also that they needed to be like patient with us because we were going to have a hard time.
So were you able to find a surrogate that was like simpatico with you guys, that had kind of the same, was able to handle that? And
she was amazing. It took us about 4 months to get matched with the surrogate, and we got matched with a woman named Catherine. She's from Kentucky, and we got her letter. She has 2 kids of her own, and she had carried once before. So she was a surrogate for a second time. And I think the agency matched us on purpose with somebody that was a second time surrogate, just kind of knowing that this might be a little bit hard for us emotionally.
Right.
She had an incredibly supportive husband as well as a supportive network. Her mom in particular was just really proud of what she was doing and how she was helping people. And for us, we didn't have a lot of requirements for what our surrogate needed to be. We just wanted them to be healthy, able to carry, and we wanted them to have a support network. And she absolutely had that. And, I remember getting on the first Skype call with her and her husband. We were so nervous. Turns out they were so nervous too. And, with the help of the agency, you have like really hard conversation, going in and having someone else carry your baby is really hard. So we had a lot of those conversations. How did we want the delivery to go? What would happen if something went wrong? Just kind of talking through everything. And she was so open and so loving and so really wanting to do this for us. And, for her, this was not even a little bit about the money. It was all about helping somebody else. And she loved being pregnant. Pregnancy was something she found really beautiful. And that was, she and birth, she also found was like super beautiful. She wanted to have a doula and a really natural birth. And we were supportive, of course, of all of that. So yeah, we moved forward. She was the first surrogate we met and we felt she was amazing. And I think, I want to say 2% of the surrogates that apply to be surrogates with Circle actually become surrogates. So they're really, really cautious about how they screen people, kind of making sure that these women are, amazing, really.
Right.
They really helped us just kind of understand what we were doing. The pregnancy was wonderful.
How many embryos did you have?
We only had one.
Okay, so they transferred the one. And
they transferred one. Well, before we even did the transfer, our surrogate came out to New York, but really to Connecticut to get screened. So they did like a medical screening. And that was an opportunity for us to spend time with her and to really bond with her and her husband and show them where we lived and show them New York and get to really spend time with them. So we did that. It was really nice. And then she came out maybe about 6 weeks later, after she had started on the meds and was ready to receive our embryo. And she got pregnant, on the first try. And we were so happy and so excited. And the pregnancy was progressing wonderfully. We spoke to her and her husband on a weekly basis. We did weekly Skype calls with them, really getting to know them and hearing about how the pregnancy was going. One thing that was important to us, because we were so nervous about this pregnancy, was that we were able to FaceTime into her doctor's appointments. So we joined all of her doctor's appointments via FaceTime. And she was so wonderful in trying to schedule those appointments like early in the morning so that we could join. It was really, really wonderful of her.
That's
so
cool.
Yeah, we did that. And then we went out to her hometown for the 20-week ultrasound. It was the ultrasound itself was really great. And, the appointment went wonderfully. Everything was wonderful. But it was also an incredible opportunity to spend time with her. She's really involved in her community. And I remember it was the fall and they had this harvest festival in her community, and she was in charge of organizing it. And she invited my husband and I to go, and my husband's an artist. And so we did this little arts and crafts projects where we were helping people create harvest crowns. And so we set this little table up and we were, creating these harvest crowns, and people didn't know us. So they would come over and be like, wait, who are you? And every once in a while, Catherine would just come over with her big belly and be like, oh yeah, I'm carrying their baby. And it was just something she was so proud of and so excited to share. And it was just such a wonderful kind of moment for us and for all of us. So everything was great until 29 weeks. I was in my office. It was early in the morning and I was waiting for the call from Catherine for an appointment, and it wasn't coming in. And I was getting so nervous. And, I remember calling my husband and saying, I don't get it. Not only is she not calling, but she's not texting, because normally she would say, still in the waiting room or, waiting in the back. And I wasn't getting any updates. And sure enough, 2 hours later, I got a phone call from a maternal fetal medicine doctor. She was seeing a midwife. So this was a doctor I had never spoken to. And this doctor said, we have some really bad news. Your baby had an irregular heartbeat during the ultrasound. There's a mass in your baby's body. We're not sure exactly where it is yet, but you need to get here immediately, as soon as possible. And my heart dropped, and it was like time stood still. I called my husband. I said, we have to get a flight now. I remember running out of my office to somebody on my team and saying, I have a family emergency. I'm going to be gone. Yeah. And I actually hadn't told my team at work, and I had a team of almost 20 people, and I hadn't told any of them what I was going through because we hadn't yet passed that 31-week mark. And I didn't want to say anything until after 31 weeks because I didn't feel like I could breathe until then. And so here we were. It was actually, at that point it was 27 weeks. And so I just said, I have a family emergency, and I just left. And my husband and I got the next flight we could to Kentucky, and I cried the entire ride there.
Sure.
And I just couldn't believe this was happening to us again. And we were just trying to be positive and trying to, think like, who knows, like maybe it's just, something that can be fixed. Like, let's learn more. Let's just be positive about this. And we got to the hospital, and we spent essentially 2 weeks in the hospital with our surrogate, trying to save our baby, trying to figure out, what we could do to save her life. And
what were they saying?
What they discovered was it was something called a rhabdomyoma. It's a large growth that sometimes develops in babies' hearts, but usually develops in the last couple of weeks of pregnancy, and actually usually isn't big enough to cause problems and usually resolves itself after the baby is born. This particular rhabdomyoma was enormous, and it was taking over almost the entire left ventricle of our daughter's heart. Oh, we didn't know what we were having, but during this time in the hospital, we found out we were having a baby girl. Okay. And the problem was this growth was so big that it was causing her heart not to be able to pump blood throughout her body. And so, test after test, ultrasound after ultrasound, we just kept learning that, fluid was building up around her brain, around her heart, around her lungs, and she just wasn't going to make it. And it was just so hard. In the beginning, we held out a lot of hope. We named our daughter. We named her Avellina. My husband's dad is from a town called Avellino in Italy, and we lost him a few years ago. And we named our daughter in honor of him. And we, set up the hospital room with little like tea light candles, and we had our surrogate had her doula, but we also got her like Reiki and all these other things to really just do everything we possibly could to make it a positive outcome. But we couldn't. We weren't able to. And at 29 weeks, our daughter was born via C-section. We knew we were only going to have a few hours or days with her. And we arranged to have Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep come. So, when her husband, our surrogate's husband, was with her in the room when the C-section occurred. And then our daughter was brought to us in a separate room afterwards. And we had about 2 hours with her before she passed away. And we, played her. No, it was so hard. I guess maybe it was, we knew what was going to happen. We knew the outcomes. We were prepared for that. I was so sad that my stepdaughter didn't get to meet her baby sister. I was so sad that our parents and our family couldn't have spent some of those 2 hours with us. But we were in Kentucky, they're in New York, we couldn't do that. And that's, one of the real downsides of the fact that surrogacy is illegal in New York. We don't get to share these things with our family. But, we played beautiful music for her. We held her. We just kept telling her how much we loved her. And we spent, 2 hours with her before she passed away. It's really, really hard time for us.
Oh my God. I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
And it's good though that you had the photos, right? That you knew about Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep at this point. So you probably have at least a collection of photos.
We do, and I cherish them, and I'm so grateful. And that photographer did a really great job of being there, but not getting in the way of our time together. He took a lot of really wonderful pictures, and then he excused himself and let us have our time with her.
Yeah. Wow. So hard.
It was so hard. And
I'm sure the surrogate, it was traumatic for her. And
horrible for her. And, it's part of why we didn't want to go back to New York right away. We wanted to make sure she was okay. This was our loss, but it was very much her loss. She did this for us. She did this to give us a baby. And, she did give us a baby. But that baby, didn't stay with us. And it was so hard for her.